Hello, everybody, and welcome to the iSpring Solutions webinar series, where every week we talk about e-learning trends, share iSpring tips and tricks, and cover clients' cases. My name is Paulina. I am the community manager at iSpring, and I will be the moderator for today's webinar, where we will be speaking about igniting organization-wide innovation through learning. And to cover this topic, I have invited a wonderful presenter, Maggie Nichols, who is the CEO and president of Eureka Wrench. Hi, Maggie. Thanks a lot for tuning in. How are you doing today?
Super. It's hot in Cincinnati, but I'm happy to be here with this crew at lunchtime. Fair warning, I have had 5 cups of coffee, so we're gonna go.
We're gonna go fast.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Well, I'm excited to join you all here today. It's going to be a fantastic run, and we're going to cover a lot of material. But like I said, I've had a lot of coffee, but I always have to do this where I slow down for a second and I have to say what I'm not going to say. And I had a really hard time with that this time, a really hard time. So I overdid it. I know I did. I'm going to give you way more than an hour can handle, but I figure you guys are pros, so you'll be able to handle it and get energized, hopefully, along the way. Igniting organization-wide innovation through learning. This was actually a presentation that I was all set to give at a fantastic conference that unfortunately was canceled thanks to COVID, but you guys get the benefit of not only the presentation, but a fun little thing we were going to give away at the conference anyway. So stay tuned to the end, as she said, and I'll share that with you. So who we are and what we do, just to give you some grounding, right? So the Eureka Ranch, we're a think tank and innovation company, been around since 1986, and our mission is to change the world through systems that enable everyone to think smarter, faster, and more innovatively. So we're all about innovation, and we're all about actually innovation training, which is the secret weapon to the entire thing. So before we get too far into this, I want to jump right in with a poll to get a sense of where you guys sit with all of this. So the question we're going to launch here in just one second is, what evidence of value does your organization's innovation training provide? First could be like, what do you mean innovation training? We don't have one. Or pick the highest number that you think you could say yes to. So do you get a positive reaction? Do you see results in real learning? Do you results in a perceived behavior change? Or do you have quantifiable direct business impact? So answer that real quick for us.
So I did launch the poll, and you guys should see it on the screen. I already see some people voting. If for some reason the polling doesn't work for you, please try to minimize the window, and this should resolve the issue. But I'm really curious to find out what you guys think about this question. And so far, Maggie, what do you think? Which option we have leading?
Do you know what? The option we have leading is, I'm not surprised by it. And the lead is, what do you mean innovation training? We don't have that in our organization, which is common in a lot of organizations, because people believe in many places, in many cases, that innovation is something you're born with, like creativity, as opposed to something that you can learn. So it is pretty uncommon as a thing that is taught overtly in the whole scheme of things. Coming up in second place, though, you're getting a positive reaction. So about half of you say we don't have any, about 20% or so are leading in. You can see that with a positive reaction. The next one, most popular, would be perceived behavior change. That's a good thing. Lowest of the rankings is our innovation training results in quantifiable direct business impact. So it's good we're talking today, because I'm going to start from there and go backwards.
Awesome. So let me close it and share the results with everybody really quickly so that you guys can see how everybody else voted. And at this point, I will hide them and pass the mic back to you, Maggie.
Awesome. Well, we're going to, as Tom Peters would say, begin with the end in mind. And I'm going to reverse engineer for you what it takes to innovate from the front lines of innovation. So as I mentioned, we're an innovation company. We've been in business since 1986, working with big companies, small companies, incubators, all kinds of stuff, even universities, you can see they're listed as well, community colleges, to figure out how do we innovate more on a regular basis, bigger, better, faster. So far, the impacts have been good. And so what I'm going to share with you is how this happened. right? What are the kernels and the nuggets of creating this innovation impact? So whether you want to look at direct impact, so how do we actually make innovations happen? One of the most popular ways to measure that is through the dollars and cents that a company or an organization wins, right? So there's $19 billion worth of projects and work underway using what I'm going to talk to you about. And there's about 1 million we call touch points, demonstrations and evidence of the people inside these companies doing things that are innovative every day that aren't necessarily new products, new services, and things like that, right? So the ways we help companies with innovation is through creating a pipeline of cool ideas, helping them with a process for innovation, and the one I'm going to talk about most today, how do we get our people to be innovative no matter what they do? But let me give you a little bit of a vantage point of the opposite of probably where you come from, which is where we come from. And that is, like I said, since 1986, we've been helping all these big companies coming up with big answers to the next new thing, a product, a service, a business, a brand, whatever. We've worked with tons of teams and tons of companies to create tons of ideas. And what's happened since 1986? Well, as we stood back, right, as innovators ourselves, and really everybody in innovation just wants to see their innovation go, right? You don't want to create something that nobody cares about. You want to create something that goes somewhere. And we would see many of those cool, disruptive ideas that companies came up with ship, right? We helped with Disney Institute and American Express Black Card and a ton of other things. But of 25,000 concepts that we helped companies create, many of them never made it that far, right? This is maybe 1% of everything that we invented, but so many stayed on the cutting room floor. And why is that? So we had to step back a few paces and kind of go, okay, we know disruptive ideas are good. They're what we wanted. They're what companies wanted. What happens when they go back and they're not equipped with the systems and the thinking and the tools to actually make something really disruptive happen, right? That's a problem. And then we started looking even more deeply, and it was a problem even all the way up to the first part of this year, and especially now in the COVID environment. All these research reports started to come out saying, hey, you know what? CEOs agree, whether you want to look at World Economic Forum or you want to look at Pricewaterhouse or whomever, that a core capability of ours is not innovation. We don't have that in our culture. We don't have that in our people. Our people need to be upskilled for innovation, but we don't do it today, which kind of echoes a little bit of what you guys said in the earlier survey, that there aren't necessarily things to teach them because we don't know what to teach. Back in 2006, we worked with the University of Maine to pioneer a new field of academic study in leadership science called innovation engineering. You can Google it, you can look into it. There's a whole bunch of schools that teach it now, the undergraduate, graduates, and we teach it to professionals. Here's what I'm going to give you the short course of that and the things to keep in mind here in the next few minutes. But what I want to first do is debunk a myth. And one of the big things that you can do in your particular role is help to echo the breaking of this myth within your organization. And that is this myth. The assumption is inside innovation that the big key is the big idea. If we just have a big idea cool enough, then we can bring it back to our shop and make it a success. We just need the big, silver bullet idea. The reality is that's so not true. This one research study, I think, just hits the nail on the head. This one white paper followed basically wow inventions created by MIT, right? So a big company would show up at MIT's front door and say, hey, I need a big idea. It needs to be patentable. It needs to be breakthrough. It needs to be something totally disruptive and totally wow. And MIT goes, well, you know what? We have exactly that. And they would sell that cool idea, that cool technology or whatever it was to that company. So you would think that is the big idea. They win. They got it. But they would take it back to their normal system for making an idea a reality with their normal stuff, doing their normal day-to-day, and there was an 80% failure rate, which means they didn't even get it out the door, let alone see success or failure in the marketplace, right? So this is a systemic issue. It isn't about the big idea, but it's even deeper than that. It's even deeper than the system, and this is where learning and development is absolutely crucial, because the real root issue, the reality is, the key to really being successful with innovation is not the next big idea. It's having a continuous learning culture that keeps up with the pace of human knowledge, right? The key to really being successful with innovation that is often overlooked, time and time and time again, is learning and development. It is inside people and teaching them how to be a never-ending font of innovation, no matter what their job is, versus just waiting for the next big idea to hit. So what I'm going to do for you now is we're going to walk through some key considerations that you should be thinking about as you look to embed innovation in any way that you can inside your work, inside your organization. So here's one key consideration. We got another poll coming up for you here in just 1 second. The one key thing to start off with is, you should have an answer to this. You shouldn't have an answer for the question, why should we even bother innovating, right? So many people in your organization might have a different answer for that. Why should we bother? So let me answer that by having you answer a question, and maybe you can find out the answer on your own. So looking at this chart, we'll launch the poll here in a second. I want you to pick where you think your organization is on the life cycle curve. Next, I'm going to ask department. This time, think about your whole organization, your whole company, whoever you work for. Are you in the startup phase? Are you in the growth phase? Are you in the mature? Maybe that's the highest profits you've ever had, or kind of sitting on the top there. You're doing really well. Are you in decline, or are you at death's door? I'm going to have you pick one of those numbers, and we're going to launch the poll right now.
All right, so the poll is up, and I see that it's working because people are already voting. And sorry, Maggie, we had a couple of requests for you to maybe slow down a little bit because for some people it's hard to follow. But I would like to still mention, guys, that the recording will be available. So if you missed something, please don't worry. You will be able to replay this whole presentation at your own pace. So don't worry. Okay.
Well said,
So
and I can be mindful about it.
awesome. So I see that a lot of people have already voted, so maybe I can close the poll and we can talk about the results really quickly. Let me
Absolutely.
share them.
All
Okay.
right, so you guys can see a lot of you are in growth mode, a lot of you are in mature mode. Some in starting up, and then some in decline, which is a fascinating thing. So before I answer those issues and we talk about that, I want you to answer the second poll now. So that was about your organization. So we were in 2 and 3 mostly. Now I want to ask the question, where is your department on the life cycle curve? So most of you, learning and development, HR, the training function, whatever you are, think about your department within your organization. Where would you plot your department on the life cycle curve? Weigh in on that one, and then we'll talk about both of them. Thank you guys for doing the quick answers. You're moving right
Yeah.
along.
And I'm happy to see a lot of people at the growth and mature point.
Absolutely. And there's pros and cons to both those things. Innovation is relevant no matter where you are. So it's really important to have a plan. But knowing where you are is a big part of it too. So let's go ahead and share those results, Paulina, just because we
Sure.
just wanted a taste test. Awesome. So growth again, right? A lot of people think their department's in growth. A lot of people think that their organization is in growth, which is fantastic. And the good news is, the spoiler alert, is that actually it doesn't matter where you are on the curve. Innovation kind of is that perpetual fountain of youth that lets you reboot and recycle. So it's great when you're in the growth phase. It's also great when you look ahead, because you know what? Right now, with most of you in the growth phase, is exactly when you need to be thinking about your next chess move, which is somewhat counterintuitive for a lot of groups. A lot of groups think, man, we're in growth, things are moving quick, I'm barely keeping up, like my desk is completely loaded, I can't even possibly think about the next thing after this. But what ends up happening with a lot of groups is you end up going at naturally to cycle number 3, they're the mature phase, and then it's very easy to tip off the other side if you don't have a plan for what's next. So that's a good thing, that you're in the perfect place to do a lot of innovating. It's the perfect staging. If I could wish something for you, I would put you in that growth phase. The con here, is that sometimes if people are in growth mode, the urgency and importance of innovation is hard to find, because people think, man, we don't need to, right? We're good. We're doing a lot of great stuff. We're getting a lot of great uptake. We don't need to innovate because we're just keeping up. And that's a bit of a fool's gold notion, right? You know, the world is constantly changing. If we've learned anything in the last few months, we know there are unexpected curves ahead. So the more you can think about growth and innovation now, the better off you are. All right, let's keep hopping on into some other keys here. So another key that's really important to think about when you want to ask people to get on the boat with you for innovation is to know what you're asking for. I think a lot of people today, and I'm going to guess most of you on this call as well, have heard the term innovation, and everybody probably thinks of something different about what that means, right? Does that mean Elon Musk launching a Tesla in space? Does that count for innovation? Or does a process improvement thing that I do, does that count for innovation? How much is big? How much is small? It's such a ubiquitous term right now. So when you ask your employees, hey, let's do more innovating, that in and of itself can be difficult without a common definition. So it's important to have one. I'm going to give you one that you're welcome to borrow, because it does a really great job of hemming it in, and it allows you to have the flexibility of how you apply it. And that common definition that we like to use is something that's meaningfully unique. So an innovation could be meaningfully unique, and meaningful meaning it has purpose, it adds real value to whomever it's for, but it's also non-obvious and it's novel, right? It's something that maybe nobody would expect. So that can be a process, that can be an employee, it can be meaningfully unique, a product can be meaningfully unique, a new method for hiring can be meaningfully unique. But it's a good way to add a bit of a litmus test to kind of go, okay, this is probably something that my organization would find value in it if it has both those two things. Bonus points if you can go to the next level. So not only define innovation for your organization, but also have a way to measure it, right? Because innovation, just like it's ubiquitous, can also be subjective, right? Some people think that was really innovative and that wasn't, and how do I know the difference? Well, if you might adopt this meaningfully unique phrase, you actually can measure that. You can make it a science. And this is actually rooted in, again, back in the day, we've been a research house for testing a lot of ideas, literally where consumers would come in and vote on ideas and how you get there. And you can actually measure meaningful uniqueness. And I'm going to give you a really easy way to do it. The way you measure meaningful uniqueness is you ask whomever the idea is intended for, its intended audience. You can ask them, how likely are you to buy this? Ask them that on a 0 to 10 scale, right? So give me a score, 0 being the worst, 10 being the best. And then ask them to rate how new and different is this idea, 0 being not at all, 10 being very. Then here's the math calculation. Then what you want to do is you want to weight those scores so that 60% of the weighting comes from the purchase intent score and 40% from the new and different. I'll give you a hint. If you get a score that's higher than 10, you should recheck your math, because it shouldn't work out like that, right? You want to weight it on those two things. And what you want to look for as a rule of thumb is a 5, a 6, or a 7, right? If you have an idea, it's a baby idea, you're just getting started, you shared it with someone, you asked them those two questions, you want to get a weighted score of a 5, a 6, or a 7. If you get a low score, that's fine. It just means it's probably not that innovative, right? The higher you go, the better you are. But usually we see a good benchmark is that 5, 6, or 7 to be looking for. Now, most of you on this call are probably not responsible for things like goods and services, right? Not directly about what you're going to sell to an audience. And that's the case in most folks inside an organization that are trying to innovate, right? Not everybody is there figuring out what the next new growth opportunity for a product or service is. In that case, what you do is, rather than asking purchase intent, you ask, how much do you like it? How much do you like this idea from a scale of 0 to 10, and how new and different scale of 0 to 10? You can use this measure to just give you a really quick read on how people feel about an idea. And it's great because it gives you something quantifiable and tangible. Because a lot of times when people share ideas, it can be a feel thing, right? It can be like, that seemed good, or you might get a lot of people who are in build modes and they might hear your idea and then say, what if you, what if you, what if you? But at the end of the day, this score is really what drives behavior afterward. So this is a score you could be looking for. So it's a great way to just measure an idea, which is really handy. But you might have a different challenge. That's cool if you have an idea, but what if you don't? What if you don't, right? So you, as development and training professionals, can give people a simple construct for creating ideas in any situation, right? Sometimes they need a place to start. You know, you guys well know 72% of the working world today is left-brained, and a lot of left-brained people don't give themselves credit for being creative, and they just think they can't. But sometimes they just need a little help to get started. So I'm going to give you a simple little equation that you can use, that your staff can use to help you come up with ideas every single time you're challenged. Here's how it goes. In order to create those meaningfully unique ideas, you need some ingredients. And those ingredients are stimulus. Literally, this is an equation that we have proven to the 99.99% confidence interval. So it's not just a visual, it really does work. You need stimulus. Take that exponentially with the power of diversity and diversity of thinking styles. And then the dividing part is the fear, right? So we're going to talk a little bit about each one of these. So stimulus is something that you can use to help inspire new thinking, solve problems, come up with a new idea for anything. And it really is this 1 + 1 = 3. Now, sometimes stimulus is really linear, right? So you have a couch plus a bed, you get a sofa bed. That kind of works. Sometimes stimulus doesn't work. You have a radio and a toaster. See, sometimes it doesn't work, but the whole point is you need more stimulus to help your brain think of more ideas, right? And it's just really how the brain works, right? We've got tons of neurons in our head, and the more we can make those synaptic connections between them, the more we can create new ideas and trigger new thoughts. Unfortunately, the older we get, the more stress we have, the more imbibing at the local, pub down the street. All those things can kill brain cells. What we want to do is try to light up the connections between the ones that we have that remain, right? And what we want to do is we want to help the brain not work how it wants to work, if that makes any kind of sense. So let me show you what I mean by that. So Edward de Bono came up with this concept of lateral thinking, among many other concepts that he invented in his lifetime. And one thing that he noticed is, wow, our brains are really good at pattern recognition. We really want to go from problem to solution in a very linear way. And once we do that once, it's almost like we've built just a permanent road between those two things. So it's great for efficiency, but it doesn't do a great job doing original thinking. It doesn't help you get to new solutions. You keep coming up with the same stuff, right? So what we can do as a cheat or as a hack is we use stimulus to break up that thought pattern. So rather than going from problem to solution directly, can we introduce a new novel piece of stimulus that might make us go, oh, hang on a second, maybe we try this other way. And it can help you with that non-linear connection. So some examples of using stimulus that we've used in the past. When we helped Nike go into their first outdoor footwear beyond running, we looked at a lot of military equipment and what they use for outdoor gear. When we needed to help American Express come up with their signature black card, which has like a $2,000 fee, we looked at high-end service and Ritz-Carlton to really inspire not only what the product was, but how we could actually deliver on that level of concierge service. Even for us, right, as an innovation and training company, we looked at everything from flipped classroom to Benjamin Bloom to PDSA and formative assessment to help us figure out what's a new way that we can do online learning that outperforms our live classes versus just taking our live classes, recording them and putting them online. So it helped us kind of break through that barrier. But the whole point is, if you're stuck for a solution, look for stimulus. It doesn't always have to be related. Sometimes unrelated is a great way to break up your stimulus and your thinking patterns too. I'm not going to dive into diversity because I have a feeling that this audience knows a lot about the diversity of thinking, but I'll just kind of mention the fact that when you use stimulus on your own, it can help you on your own come up with cool ideas. But imagine looking at that stimulus with a team of people with a very diverse set of backgrounds who would all see that stimulus very differently. It will help you come up with literally exponentially more and better ideas because of that, because they'll all see it differently. And that's what you want in innovation. You want that explosion. The one I'd really like to talk to you guys though, and kind of lean into more right now, because it's really part and parcel to the bits that you can make a difference on, is methods for reducing fear. It's relevant right now more than ever before for sure, but it's also relevant just in general when it comes to innovation, because when it comes to innovation, there's a couple litmus tests that you can tell if you're onto something really cool. One is I gave you that scoring system for meaningfully unique. Another way to know whether or not you have a really innovative idea, it freaks people out. It makes them petrified. It goes, oh my gosh, it's going to require change. It's going to create chaos. All kinds of things and anxiety come up from cool ideas that we don't necessarily know how to do. So one thing that you can do is figure out, how can I have a method for helping people reduce that fear. Now, the method that we like to use with teams who are up against it, right? Most of the folks that knock on our door for help are those folks that really are struggling with, we need an answer or else some pretty terrible things are going to happen, right? We're going to have to lay off a lot of people. We're going to have to change how we work, all kinds of stuff. So it's high stress on its own, let alone working on innovation. So we know they're going to be freaked out by a cool idea because we don't know much about it. So we have choices, right? If you have a meaningful, unique idea, by definition, it will have uncertainties and risks. So the choices are, all right, don't do it, right? Kill the idea to avoid any risk, or compromise, right? So we can't do that cool version, but we could do this mediocre version pretty well, and you compromise on the idea, or you give it a different name. Now, what we do is we label it the critical issues as, you know, we call them death threats, but critical threats, and then problem solve them. And what this does is it helps you lean on that emotional nature of fear and really helps you kind of lean on a bit of psychology to help that person unshackle the fear from their ability to problem solve. So rather than saying, you know, I'm really scared of that idea, or no, instead, okay, I don't know how we could make that. Fair enough, that's a critical threat. I don't know how we could afford it. Critical threat. I don't know how we could sell that. Okay, critical threat. Those things, if I take them in pieces, I could start to problem solve about versus throwing the whole idea away. And this, getting this down, getting a process for this down and teaching people how can help prioritize their work differently. So let me give you an example, right? Let's say you're working on a new project and you've got all these things that you have to do. Okay, we're starting a new team, we're getting a new piece of work started. What are all the things we need to accomplish in order to make this happen? What ends up happening is you create this kind of to-do list, right, of tasks. And sometimes there's small issues you have to deal with, and then there's this pile of critical threats. What some people are prone to doing is starting with the small stuff. This would say the opposite. This would say, think like an entrepreneur. This would say, think like you have limited resources and you want to stop something that's not going to work quickly. So instead of starting with the big stuff, or excuse me, with the small stuff, start with the critical issue, right? How can we overcome this critical thing versus starting here? Because I don't want you to spend 6 months time wasting on the small stuff only to realize, oh man, we should have just started with the big thing at the beginning. Again, if this is an idea that you know you're doing anyway, that's a different issue, but it's really innovative. It's gonna have these critical issues that you could do first. And a simple way to address those critical issues, I have it on good authority because my kids have been doing homeschooling probably like a lot of your kids have these last couple of months. I know in 3rd grade, they probably learned something called the scientific method, like we all did. We also call it fail fast, fail cheap, or Dr. Deming called it Plan, Do, Study Act, or Plan, Do, Check Act. But we know this works, right? So if you have a really scary idea, then okay, create a plan. Like, what's the critical threat that I'm really addressing with this idea? I have this new idea for how to recruit people. My fear is this. All right, so what's one small thing that I could do this week that would give me greater confidence? I'm going to learn from that activity. Did it work? Did it not work? And then I'm going to make a new choice based on that. I know for certain success is guaranteed. I just don't know how many cycles it's going to take you. And I know the more innovative that idea is, the more cycles you're going to have to go round and round on. So it's really important to have that kind of flexibility within your thinking and that ability to try and try something new. All right, we're going to do another poll right now. And that poll is going to ask you, what's the most, in your perspective, in your experience, what's the most common reason why innovation goes too slow in an organization? That's a common complaint. So why is it that innovation goes too slow? Is it lack of curiosity in your people? Is it that your teams aren't disciplined? Is it that there's no alignment from leadership? Is it there's no creativity at the company? Or there's just no control over the whole process? So we'll launch that, and you guys let me know the most common reason for innovation going slowly.
Andrew
I wish I
says
could have all the answers.
need an all the above option.
I know. It's so satisfying to be able to see people's answers in real time to kind of roll in. But as they are rolling in, it's looking like a bit of a tie, but the biggest one does seem to be taking the lead here a little bit, and that is the lack of alignment from leadership. So it's lack of alignment from leadership, and then a little bit of a three-way tie here on curiosity and discipline and control over the process. Interestingly, not lack of creativity in the company. So that's awesome. And I totally share your perspective. There is so much cool creativity inside people that I feel sometimes organizations will overlook. That's a whole topic of a whole new series in a lot of different ways. So you can see the answers there. Lack of alignment from leadership being the main one, and then pretty much a three-way tie for curiosity, discipline, and control over the process. Those were all kind of a point apart. Well, ding ding for those folks that said lack of alignment from leadership. That actually tends to be the #1 reason why innovation teams go slow, have heavy rework cycles, and innovation doesn't ship or launch as fast as we want. And this is actually coming directly from project work, engineering backwards. So it does really start to get to root issues. And part of the challenge here, and again, this is something that's so wonderfully teachable, is that sometimes we see in innovation that leaders believe leading is creating the idea versus setting the strategy and knowing the difference, right? Because even in this, I love this, even with this poll, you guys have told me 8% of people said our problem is lack of creativity. Most of you agree it's not. We've got plenty of creativity. Most organizations do. You are absolutely brimming with a lot of clever people that you've hired to do clever stuff that are really smart. But what happens sometimes is leaders get confused as to we have to move quickly, we have to do something adventurous, we have to do something innovative. I'm going to say what we're going to do, and then I'm going to use the team to execute. But then they're still not sometimes clear in that strategy. So let me give you something to look into more, and then a framing for how we'll sometimes work with teams that really helps. So as I mentioned, most of our innovation teams do the same thing. They cite the biggest thing that helps them or makes them go slow is because there isn't alignment on what's most important and what leadership wants out of innovation. And so one thing to really lean on here, and maybe do some added Googling on, or talk to family members if you have, or you yourself have been in the military, is really look into a little bit more about commander's intent. It's a wonderful structure. It's a wonderful just 90 north to help people understand the power of sharing a vision and how others can come along. And for those of you that are not familiar with commander's intent, it's essentially a fantastic thing that our military uses to basically have the commander share with staff, look, here's the ultimate goal that we're trying to accomplish. Because what the commander knows is I've trained brilliant people, and when the world goes upside down and they have to deal with what's right in front of them at that moment, I need them to make their own choice in that moment because they're closest to the work and they're going to be better off to make a choice than I am, versus coming back to the commander saying, what do I do? Basically, can we be so clear that in the absence of further orders, staff would know what to do? Have we been that clear? Now, what we do with teams is we'll give them a template for innovation strategy, and it's very simple to use, and it riffs off of commander's intent. We call it a blue card because we print it on blue paper. It's really not that savvy, but it gets the job done. And that is, okay, boss, leader, we need to communicate to staff the narrative, right? Why is it we need to innovate on this? Why is it important? Why now, and why in this area, right? We need to literally light up the hearts and minds, and we want to build that intrinsic motivation to really want to go after it. Then what are we after? So what are you asking for? I need ideas for what? So paint that mission, but then also say, what are the exclusions and constraints? A lot of times in innovation, people assume that it's the big blue sky and let's not hamper people down. Let's see how big they can go. When in actuality and in practicality, you're not. You do have constraints. You're not going to do everything. Being overt and clear with the team is far better than being wide open only to shut them down later. And then last but not least, you can give them exploration areas to think about. But there's a great opportunity to teach leadership how to frame the situation in a way that's really aligned, so they agree on, and clear, so that people can innovate to solve those issues as opposed to them giving the answer. A couple quick ones here, recognizing that culture and systems are two sides of the same coin. So many times, and I know you guys are kind of in the middle of this on a regular day-to-day basis probably, But a lot of what we see inside organizations when it comes to innovation not getting enough traction is people have either said it's not in our culture or we haven't taught people how. And a lot of folks that you said at the beginning of this, you don't have necessarily an innovation training camp or our training offered. So it can be hard for people to know what to do even within a system, or be better, or have that system live within them, like Toyota does with their total quality. So what we found useful is to have kind of three things moving in tandem, right? This lovely juxtaposition of teaching people innovation, having your process that mirrors that, and then, which was for alliteration's sake, right, power. So what is the ask? Making sure that leaders are coming and bringing strong strategies and driving for innovation and asking for innovation and reinforcing that on a regular basis. So this is a lot to kind of put in your head. And so when we framed this talk originally for the conference as, how do you do it organization wide, right? So this could be one thing if you're working with a department or a couple of people, or even just talking about training people, but how do you get a whole organization to be more innovative across the board? And the part of the answer of where to start is don't start everywhere. Don't boil the ocean all at once. What we see work really well in organizations is to really respect the life cycle curve, and leveraging diffusion, right? So I'm sure you recognize this. I'm sure you can see your own employees sit under this curve somewhere, where some of your employees are innovators and early adopters, and you got your late majority and laggards. What we find is really helpful is to start innovation training or start innovation culture work with those innovators in your organization, with those early adopters. Incubate it there so that they can pull it into the rest of the organization. And a lot of questions I often get as well, especially if I bet a lot of you are in big organizations, right? Thousands and thousands of people. How do you even begin to think about how many people you really need to involve in such an effort? Is it just the innovation team? Is it just business development? How much is R&D? How much is marketing? We would say you should be agnostic as to what function wants to innovate. Everybody needs to innovate. But instead think about, okay, if I need to create a culture of change, think about who the 10% would be. So this great article, and you can look it up there if you'd like to, really looked at how do you change a whole culture of people, a whole set of people. Now, if you kind of read between the lines of this particular journal article, it seems like it was commissioned by the government when they go into a new place or a new area, maybe, that they want them to build their own infrastructure, that they want to take on their own ideology or their own way of thinking. And it's like, what seeds do we need to plant, and how many of them do we need to convince of a new way of working to let it actually take root, to let it actually shift? And what this article said, and what we found the same thing to be true in large organizations, is really aim for that 10%. Right? Who are the 10% that you really need to come on to thinking, hey, we need to create an innovation culture or get to that new way of thinking? And not only that 10%, but you have to think about, how do they have unshakable belief, right? Unshakable belief comes from more than reading a book, right? Or seeing something and going, oh yeah, I guess that did work. It really is about how you get that 10% to really just absolutely believe to their core that this is the way forward. Anything less than 10% literally doesn't matter. 9.9%, 9.5%, it really is that tipping point, this magical place that if you can at least get 10%, you can see a lot more things happen. Another key, because you'll hear this a lot in your area if you haven't already, and especially in your function, we hear a lot in our L&D, hearing from their business partners that, you know what, innovation is nice and all, this isn't a good time. This isn't a good time. This isn't a good time. Unfortunately, and I think this is probably going down a lot in terms of commentary, the world changes anyway, as we have all experienced these last few months. You just can't opt out of this equation, whether you can ask Blockbuster or Maytag or Circuit City or Chrysler or any others. There's a whole bunch of topsy-turvies happening right now. We don't have the choice or the luxury to wait to innovate. The time could not be more right on top of us. And the other added challenge is, without training, it can look daunting, right? Training's key because we need people to be able to react really quickly right now, to innovate on a dime, to innovate faster than ever before. And it continues to prove out over history This graph actually shows you the adoption curve of new technologies over time. You know, obviously it took a while for the telephone or the automobile to take off. By the time they launched iPads, it was literally instantaneous. People are accepting new innovation at a faster and faster rate. In fact, places are demanding it. Markets are demanding it. We get exposed to so many more things, and so we have no choice but to keep up. And the good news is we actually did a research study in the 2008, looking at the 2008 recession results, was actually on behalf of the Department of Commerce, which was fantastic. We had the opportunity to look at companies in 2011 based on what they did in 2008 in the last recession. And those that innovated during the recession came out super strong 3 years later. That's the non-innovators versus the innovators. They had more products and services, they had more customers, they had higher profits. So when the chips are down, it's I'm sad to say, a great time to innovate. And you're probably seeing that in your own world. We were working with a physician here at the Cincinnati Children's Hospital who's been in multiple crises scenarios. And, you know, crises can be the burning platform for change. And he cited how many things have come out of times of war, times of struggle, times of strife, where we throw up, we remove the red tape, we do so many things faster because we have to for survival, and the long-term benefits can be seen widely. All right. So one other big point I wanted to make with this team, because again, this is something that you guys sit square in the middle of, and that is connecting the dots on relevancy for yourself and for your business partners on innovation. So I did this, I didn't do it with you guys, but I did it with the last talk that I did, and it was for about 800 people filled out this assessment, and it was for a conference. It was for a conference that actually had innovation in its title, believe it or not. And we asked 2 questions of those respondents in advance. How important do you personally agree that it's time to innovate, and how urgent is it for you to take action? And this was just a few months ago. And what they answered on an individual basis brought them in at the 25th percentile of the database, which now I was there to talk about innovation, so it was a little awkward to start talking this way. But what it demonstrates is the complete disconnect, right? These are employees, mid-level managers, and employees at large companies. Meanwhile, let's revisit the slide I shared with you at the beginning. CEOs are saying, we need more innovation. And yet staff is saying, what, that's not me though. Innovation isn't in my title. Like, that's not relevant to my job. So there's a huge opportunity for you to paint the story of, you know what, we need our innovation more than just in one tiny team that we might be having going to figure out new stuff. Because what happens if you do that, if you invest in that kind of organizational structure and fostering, if it's only them that innovates, what happens is it doesn't migrate to the rest of the organization. And everybody needs to innovate. New HR practices, new finance practices, new ways to market, new ways to get new customers, new ways to do operations. There's 1,000 ways to do innovation. And there's 3 ways that we've seen that people can really get traction. A major crisis like now, you're seeing a ton of companies do the pivot because there now is a burning platform, or leadership leads and decides, I'm going to spend a lot of time on this. Or, you know what, you can also do a people out transformation where you find people, those willing people that are just absolutely fired up to do something that matters, and you give them more energy and more oxygen. Because what we believe is really important is to think about innovation in a bigger scale, right? So like this, like assume you had to rehire for your own position tomorrow, right? You could just say, hey, I'm an innovation or an L&D professional, hire me. But what if you could go in and say, no, I'm a professional, but I also know how to, you know, create, communicate, fast track big ideas for my function. I'm an innovator. We would say that innovation is the new life skill of tomorrow. And in fact, you know, colleges and universities, we recently, with our partners at University of Maine, took a study that was done for the Association of American Colleges and Universities. And this is what employers are looking for, right? Innovators, innovative thinkers, people who can create, who can talk about ideas, who can commercialize. So an opportunity that you have is to spin that in a way that's relevant to who you're talking to, right? So maybe it is a new service for, to get more people in the business, or a new program that you can invent for training, or business model, or social media, or whatever it is. If you have a problem, then innovation is often the answer. But let me tell you the story, right? So I'm going to assume most of you, if you're the average bourbon aficionado or a novice in bourbon, you would probably say at least 3 years. 13 years would make a better one. Probably something like that in terms of timing. Well, let me tell you a story of people who apply exactly what I talked to you about in the whole talk. This is a picture of the Brain Brew crew. So the Brain Brew crew, you can see their collection of experience. There's a restaurant, well, you can read their titles. Collectively, how much experience do they have making whiskey or bourbon? 0 years, none at all. Very high risk investment. But they did everything that I just talked to you about, and they put it in play. They basically said, look, innovation is going to be the way we operate for everything. We don't know anything. It's high risk. We're complete novices at this whole thing, but let's try to use this methodology or this way of thinking for innovation and see what we come up with. So they did. They used lots of stimulus to help them inspire, okay, what are other ways that we could use to just re-engineer how we could make whiskey or bourbon? Because there's usually a very traditional way of doing it. The normal way is you take, you make the bourbon, you distill it in copper stills, you put it in a barrel, and you put it up on a shelf in a place called a rick house, and you let it sit. And with the seasons, as the hot and cold of the seasons changes, what happens is the liquid goes in and out of that wood in that barrel to make it smoother and more delicious. The longer you leave it sit, usually the more delicious it is. So that's the normal way, but these guys were like, well, I don't want to do normal, I want to do different. They looked at stimulus like sous vide, reverse engineering, gastronomy type things. They looked at the pulp and paper manufacturing process, because it uses wood and ligands in a different way than alcohol does, in the exact opposite way. Using all of this as stimulus, they created an entirely new way to make bourbon and whiskey. Literally, they engineered a way to create bourbon and whiskey in 40 minutes, 40 minutes. They can make a great whiskey, where the traditional whiskey company usually takes about 3 years to make one batch of whiskey. So literally, they kind of think, oh, this might be good. They put it on a shelf, and 3 years later, they try it. So these guys invented a whole new way to make whiskey, but that wasn't enough. Like, what if it's not good? So what if it's fast, right? So here is a picture of their bar, where they literally created 72 cycles in 7 days, because they could try a whole bunch of stuff. Every time they'd come up with a new bottle, they'd try it with customers. That's pictures of them taking it out to people and trying and testing it. That is plan, do, study, act, just like we talked about. They were taught how to innovate. They applied the system. They went in and they practiced it over and over and over again. How can you not get smarter about what would make a delicious new whiskey if you can do that many cycles of experimentation? And they do it faster on everything that they do, because they innovate new process, and they don't take status quo as good enough. So the result has been, they've got lots of awards that they've been winning. This is a collection of some of their local stuff here in Cincinnati, but they can even take the science even further, and they innovated a way to create your own whiskey. This is a picture of a local chef that literally made his own batch by the bottle. Normally that's completely impossible, or you buy a whole barrel for thousands of dollars. And literally before COVID, people would show up and custom make their own by the bottle, and then come pick them up. You could make your own custom whiskey using the same process. So they innovated all the time. And then COVID happened. And what did they do inside 48 hours? They pivoted completely to making hand sanitizer, which now they're supplying to the greater Cincinnati area completely free of charge, in partnership with a lot of things. So beside the point, that's a lot of cool stuff that they're doing. They're working really fast. They're innovating all the time, and process and people and everything. How does that happen? The key to their success is everyone is taught how to innovate, and they're also told that it's core to what you do, no matter your role or function. So let me give you a sense of what this does for a person. We're going to play a video of Bruce. Bruce is a groundskeeper and one of the founding members of the Brain Brew crew. And we're going to play a video for you now of him talking about just what it does now that he's an innovator. And Bruce is just down home goodness. You're going to hear him.
Hi, my name is Bruce Forsey. I've been with Brain Brew since the beginning. In the beginning, we did hundreds, and I do mean hundreds of tests. They call it fail fast, fail cheap, and we did fail. But we worked at it, and the next thing I know, I see my name on a patent. And I've learned something by this. Failure is not a bad thing, it's actually a good thing. It makes it better in the long run.
So I love that video of Bruce. Bruce is just salt of the earth, and he's an every guy, every Joe, all that kind of stuff. And even he's like, man, this can happen, right? I believe in fail fast, fail cheap, and they really believe it. So if I could do anything for you guys, which I can't give you this today, but if I could give you a T-shirt at the end of this webinar, it would say this on the front. It would remind you, like, we can come up with meaningful, unique ideas, and here's how. But what that really means, I'd flip the T-shirt over, and I'd give you like a black one, really, and it would say these things on the back, which is the same sentiment. I don't know, I need help, I fail a lot. If you can say those things with authenticity, then you are a killer innovator, because you have to have those things. Those are the stimulus, diversity, and fear right on top of itself. Thanks, guys, for your time today. I think we have some time for questions. Yeah?
So let's start
Great.
with the first one. Michelle is curious, how would you translate meaningfully unique to government operations?
Oh, that's great. Here, I'll turn my my camera back on here. What I would do, meaningfully unique still counts no matter what, because you really need solutions to anything. Here we go. That really speak to who your audience is. So even within government, and we've done a lot of work with government stuff, RFPs and otherwise, it's basically framing, like, how do we solve this in a way that we haven't tried before? So if there's programs or things that are staged to try to get new results, many of which we're seeing there's an evolution inside government of trying to get to new solutions, you can still use that same framing of meaningfully unique. Just don't ask about price, because it's a bit of an irrelevant probably conversation a lot. But like, how much do you like this idea versus how unique is it? And blending those two gets you to something that is different than you've thought of before. It also gives a nice grounding to like the kind of quality ideas that you want to get out. But what we also find is a lot of those types of ideas are the ones that become more viral in nature, which is a great thing we see in government, because they can be the ones that create pull, ones that create favorable word of mouth, and getting that kind of thing started and in these circles a good thing.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And Michelle, hope that answers your question. And the next one we do have is by Chandrasekhar, and I hope I pronounce your name correctly. What if I start doing an innovation and end up in loss? Should I give up or to start again from the beginning?
Great question. Great question. The answer is it's up to you, right? So here's the simple way to think about it. If you think about like the turning of the wheels, right? Let's say you come up with something that you think is pretty cool, and then you say, okay, this is really cool, but I'm really scared of this one part, right? This part, I don't know that it'll work. You have the freedom and encouragement to change the ideas you learn more, right? So let me take a cheesy example. Let's pretend I invented a new way to brew tea, and it's a new type of cup that keeps your tea warm for an hour. And I'm like, I think that's pretty cool. I'm going to go sell that. I go down to my local Starbucks. I pitch a few people out front, and they go, yeah, that's nice and all, but I'm not going to pay $50 for some cup that's going to keep my tea warm. Now, I only need it warm for 10 minutes, so maybe not. So I might go, oh, wow, okay, so they don't like my current idea. But this new thought of, wow, they don't want it for an hour, but just for 10 minutes, that might make me change my idea. What if I created a disposable cup that did last for 10 minutes, and now my pricing is going to be different, because this one's going to be 50, but if I can find a technology that lets me do durable throwaway cups, well, maybe that changes the idea. So there's an evolution that you can allow yourself to do as you learn more. What we usually say is 3 times is it, right? So if you identify a real critical issue and you've come at it 3 different ways and go, you know what, that's a non-starter, then it is probably a good time to go, you know what, not that idea, let's go find another one. So what that means, in order to increase your confidence and excitement, it means don't have one idea, right? It means it's healthy in an organization and for a person in a department to have a lot of ideas in the stable, and regularly have a lot of ideas that you're super excited about, that I can't even pick which one we want to do, because it gives you more confidence if you have to kill one along the way, that you go, no problem, because I got a whole lot more cool ones waiting behind that. So when we see people get in trouble, it's when they only have one thing of an idea and they don't have anything else, so you end up moving forward on something that really shouldn't continue. So that's the bigger lesson.
It's like don't put all your eggs in one basket.
Exactly, exactly. And it happens more than you'd think in a lot of large organizations that a lot, it's not uncommon. So but it's easy to fix. It's easy to not be stuck.
Right. Well, thanks for this advice. And let's cover next question from Anisha. What are some ways to bring in innovation in senior living industry, especially in the times of pandemic?
Oh, great idea. You know what? There are wonderful things that this being an example, right? A lot of virtual things that you can do right now just to get ideas from people from all over the place. What wonderful things I've been seeing happening in healthcare is a lot of virtual sharing and a lot of virtual brainstorming happening in a situation just like this. So one is just finding an opportunity to go like, can we partner with other groups that are just finding other solutions, national affiliations or whatever it is to stitch together to share ideas back and forth is a great way to do it where you can just literally steal from each other and that's a good thing. The other piece of advice that I'd give you is this is one of my favorite ways to kind of drum up ideas when you're really stuck is look in completely different industries, completely different. And how are they addressing something on a meta level that's the same, right? Like, so in this case where you're like, I have not enough capacity, but I still want to deliver really good care. Well, where are other places where they don't have enough capacity, but they're trying to deliver a really high standard of work? Now, maybe you look at different, entertainment areas or things that they're doing in Vegas. There's things that you can look at and go, okay, that's not healthcare, but there's something kind of cool that I can transfer over here to steal as an idea. And there are when you put your head in that space of really looking through that lens, you can find some really neat stuff that you can do that you wouldn't have thought of normally because you're going into a different area.
Yeah. Okay, so let's cover the last question for today and we will wrap up our webinar. So Sandy is asking, Commander's intent couldn't be as simple as, for example, we need to sell X number of registrations for this online course. Is there more to it than that?
There is. There is. So definitely read up on Commander's Intent a little bit. So this is it's the intention or the spirit of Commander's Intent. But one of the no-nos inside setting strategy for innovation is to use only numbers as the litmus test for whatever, right? We see this will happen a lot in business where they're like, I need $10 million where we sell 5 million now, without giving the strategic direction on, yeah, but from where, from how, from why. So really think more deeply about not, and it's fine to have a number. I'm not saying that. Like I talked about exclusions and constraints, you should be asking for something that says we need at least 100 attendees or it's not worth doing. So you can have that in there. That's important information. But what are you really asking for, right? That really think about that more so. So what is the ask? Novel ways to get people excited? Is it more about, how do I instantly impact people so that they want to sign up, really fast, and how create a system for that that's reproducible and reliable? Think beyond the number, because the number is how you know you've done enough, but it doesn't necessarily give you rooting in what you're trying to invent for or what the real result you're looking for kind of starts from. And if you send an email to that free stuff at eurekaranch.com and put the title Maggie Help, I'm happy to give you a little bit more coaching on that as well. We've got a whole bunch of things that we do to help people there. So happy to talk to you more.
Awesome. That's great. Actually, guys, I shared this email address in the chat. So please go ahead and copy it for the future use and just reach out to Maggie if you have any other questions. Because at this point, it's high time for us to wrap up this wonderful high energy session, and hopefully you go back to your workplace very much ready to innovate and bring those new solutions to your workplace and just drive the business and grow your business and be successful, because that's what we are here for. And I would like to thank all of you guys for coming today, for being so active, for participating in the polls and sending in your questions. You're just amazing and awesome, and I'm really hoping to see you at the next webinar. And of course, thanks to you, Maggie. You have been amazing. So hopefully we can have you for another session sometime in the future.
I would love that. It was super fun. Thanks for having me, guys.
Awesome. All right. Hope that everyone has a wonderful day. And as I said before, see you at the next webinar. Bye, everybody. Bye, Maggie.
Bye-bye.